Hi, this is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. Today is June 26, 2020, episode 621, and I'm here at Ocean Park, Maine, looking out at a calm ocean, approaching sunset, so there's a little pink in the water from the sky. It's been a beautiful summer day here. The interview this week, which I'm going to play for you next, is with Jaimal Yogis, whose new children's book, Mop Rides the Waves of Life, will be published in 4 days on June 30th. And after the interview, I'm going to have something to say about Amazon's planned $1 billion purchase of an autonomous ride-hailing company. Let's get started. I first spoke with the author and frequent speaker Jaimal Yogis 7 years ago on the publication of his second book, which was titled The Fear Project: What Our Most Primal Emotion Taught Me About Survival, Success, Surfing, and Love. That book had quite an impact on me in that I actually wove some of its insights about how to deal with fear into my ordinary life. I spoke with Jaimal again 3 years ago on release of his memoir, All Our Waves Are Water, Stumbling Toward Enlightenment and the Perfect Wave. His debut book, which was published in 2009, was Saltwater Buddha, a surfer's quest to find Zen on the sea. He holds a master's degree from the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. He earned that in 2005 and has published articles in the Washington Post, The Atlantic, and elsewhere. In 4 days, Jaimal's newest book will be published, and it's a children's book for ages 5 to 8. The title is Mop Rides the Waves of Life. I found it to be a really sweet and wise story of surfing and life, beautifully illustrated by a fellow named Matthew Allen. And I reached Jaimal on Wednesday, June 24th in Sacramento by Zoom and began by asking him what he was doing at that point less than a week before publication of the book on June 30th.
You know, lots of little press things, as you would expect, but and really happy to be back on your show, Len. It's always a real pleasure. But I'm happy to say book 4 is getting birth with a little more relaxation. I have anxiousness. Of course, you want it to do well. You want to make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. But I think I feel really proud of this book. I feel really excited to bring it into the world, but I also know there's so many wacky factors right now with the economy. I certainly hope that this book is exactly what kids and families, or what some kids and families at least need to help with anxiety and emotion right now. So I feel good about it, and I don't feel too anxious. I'm excited to see how it's received, and I'm rolling out a series of meditation videos for kids to go along with it, and we're doing an animated trailer, and we have a hip-hop song that goes with it. So there's all kinds of fun stuff I'm rolling out, and I'm excited to release all that. So busy, but feeling pretty relaxed about it. I'm just really happy.
That's cool. Well, it seemed like 7 years ago when we first talked, you might have mentioned that you were thinking about some children's books. Does this go all the way back to then, or what's the genesis of the book that's just coming out on the 30th?
Yes, I actually have had a long interest in children's books. I think I wrote my first one when I was I used to even write them as a kid, and then I wrote one when I was 18 just for myself. And then when our first son Kai was born 8 years ago, I wrote one. I see him crawling into the room right now to try to listen to this. Hey, go downstairs. When he was born, he was 2 weeks late, and I was really excited to be a dad and anxious. And in that time, I wrote a book for him called Turtles Don't Surf, about a turtle named Kai, which is his name, who lives in a part of the ocean where turtles are forbidden from surfing, and he has to break all the rules. So that one was just for fun and just for him, but I illustrated it myself, and but it came out well enough that I did go ahead and self-publish it and print copies, but I didn't really do the full, official release, book tour, et cetera, et cetera. So that one lives out there, and it felt like kind of a warm up. And this one actually came out totally organically. One of the things I love to do is doodle, and I was doodling this waves and this little surfer kid with curly hair, and I really liked the way he looked, and I started doodling him on little adventures at the beach and on dreamy waves. And then all of a sudden, this narrative, very simple kind of Zen narrative, was just black and white stick figure surfer kid with a few lines. And that turned into the 40 pages. And I found myself getting excited about it and submitting it to publishers and whatnot, and had good luck with that right away. So, and then the publisher matched me up with Matt Allen, the watercolor
the
artist. Who did just a fabulous job, and so that's how it came to be.
And the publisher is Plum Blossom Books. Is that have anything to do with Thich Nhat Hanh? He's sort of associated with Plum Blossom. I didn't know if it was related in some way.
Exactly, yeah. So Parallax Press is it's funny, there's 3 layers of this publisher, because Parallax Press is a partner of Penguin Random House, and they are Thich Nhat Hanh's sort of mothership publisher, Plum Village, and Plum Blossom is the children's imprint of Parallax Press.
I see.
But yeah, Parallax does a lot of mindfulness books out of Berkeley, California. They're just a really lovely group of people. I feel fortunate to have partnered with them. And it's neat because I spent time at Plum Village as a teenager when I lived in France, and Thich Nhat Hanh was hugely influential on my life. And so to be linking up with that community is really cool, because all the monks and nuns at Plum Village, the Buddhist monks and nuns, they vet all the books. So when you send out you send out your submission to Parallax, they run it by the whole board out there. And it's I remember some of those people that are on the board from when I was 17. And of course I wrote about Thich Nhat Hanh and Saltwater Buddha. So it was neat to link back up with them that way. Yeah.
Well, so the book, the title is Mop Rides the Waves of Life. And who is Mop? Some autobiographical elements, I would guess, but when you think of Mop and describe him to somebody, how do you describe him?
Well, Mop is a kid with just a mop of hair. He's got a big old head of hair, so people call him Mop because his hair looks like a mop, super curly. And again, that is somewhat autobiographical because I have big curly hair, but and I did as a kid, and I was teased about it as a kid, as Mop is.
Were you ever called Mop?
I wasn't ever called Mop, but I was called what I would get teased about is I would run down the soccer field. I played lots of sports, and people would say, "Don't look at his hair," because it was like my hair alone would juke you.
Well, it was an advantage then.
Exactly. So, but I was, I took a little offense to it. I tried to laugh it off, but then I would also blush really obviously as a kid. Like my face would turn bright red if I was embarrassed. And one of my best friends was Uriah Faber, who's a famous world champion UFC fighter now.
Oh.
And he was a really thick-skinned, great athlete, total alpha male, like in his DNA. And he would say, Jaimal, your face is getting red. He'd first make fun of my hair. Then he'd call everybody over and say, look at Jamal's face turn bright red. And he'd do it as a party trick. And then he'd get me until I was like fuming. And I'd, try to tackle him. Of course, he could beat me up too. So, so anyway, this was MOP is probably an unconscious way of processing some of that old trauma.
Right.
It's funny. I'm still friends with Uriah. I'm talking with him later today, and I now tease him a little bit about the fact that he teased me.
Yeah.
And then the other autobiographical thing about it is that MOP's mom teaches him mindfulness, which my mom kind of played that role for me too. She's a yogi and a meditator, and still is, and a teacher. But MOP is a kid who lives the life I kind of wanted to live. He's on the beach. He loves to surf, but when he goes to school, he keeps running into emotional issues and like getting teased, and he doesn't know how to work through that. And so eventually he learns how to surf the waves of his emotions like he can surf the ocean.
Exactly. I have grandsons that live in Cambridge, Jake, who is 6, and Ryan, who is 4. So I queued up the PDF that you sent me so that they could see it on Zoom. And I said, I'm going to talk to the guy who wrote this book. Tell me what you think. And they enjoyed it. They really were into it. And then when I asked them, well, what did you notice about the book? What did you like about the book? The 4-year-old says, the fish appeared 3 times. and I went back and I said, I'd seen the fish. There's a cute little fish that's swimming under MOP. But sure enough, it appears 3 times. And that had really caught the attention of the 4-year-old to the point where they wondered does the fish have a name?
It's funny. I should call him Funny Finny Fish because that's the nickname of our 4-year-old, and that's the kind of thing that he would notice too. I love that that fish was there from the beginning, the very first drafts when I was doing just black and white, and I always had a little fish in there saying hi to MOP, or he's sort of comic relief, the fish. He comes in his ohm.
Right.
MOP.
He's like a Greek one fish Greek chorus that's commenting on it.
Exactly, yeah. But the fish too, just he sort of appeared. There wasn't a lot of planning or plotting. He or she just wanted to jump in there.
That's cool.
Part of the story.
Well, my grandsons came up with names. The younger one said he would name him Deep Surfer because he swims underneath the surfers, and then the old one said he'd call him Mop Pop because he pops up wherever MOP is surfing.
I love it. All right, well that's his name. He's the Deep Surfer Mop Pop.
Yeah, exactly.
That's who he is now, forevermore. Well, there's a second one we're doing now that's going to come out in the spring. And there's a turtle involved in that. So now I'm thinking that the turtle's going to have some interaction with the Mop Pop.
Well, I was just blown away by to actually know how many times, because I would have guessed the fish was there twice. And when I went back and checked Ryan, sure enough, it was 3 times. So he's listening to the story, he's watching, and he's counting the number of times the fish shows up. The more I watched, well, both of them, but the 4-year-old, that age really fascinates me because if I take the time to slow down and try to get into his world, if he's building Legos or anything, there is so much more happening there than I ever would have imagined.
Oh yeah, I love the 4-year-old age because they're still in that stream of consciousness where they're not really trying to be logical at all. So they're free associating constantly, but then they're also getting language. And so they'll come out with these, beautiful and poetic notions and sort of philosophical points sometimes.
Yeah.
So my My children seem to never want to leave me alone when I'm on a podcast, so they're
welcome.
They're coming into the room. But that is the beauty of writing a children's book, is they've been part of it from the beginning.
Well, one thing that I've got some nephews that surf, but I've never surfed myself. I sort of get it, but what does it mean to duck dive? There's an image where the bad wave comes and what can you teach a non-surfer about that term?
Duck dive means to push your board's nose down at just the right time so that you dive under the wave. If you've been in the ocean, when you go under a wave, it's easy to do without a board. You just duck under the wave and you feel the force carry over you so you don't get walloped. But it's harder to do with the surfboard. You have to time it, so you push the nose down and then you kind of shove the tail down with your knee to follow up. And I guess it must be named after the way certain birds go under under the surf, but maybe pelicans or something. I don't know the origin of the name duck dive, but anyway, it's a cool one for me when you're making the surfing and thought metaphor, because I learned to surf at the same time that I was learning mindfulness. As I talk about in Saltwater Buddha, I ran away from home to surf because I was getting into trouble as a high school kid, and I was in Maui, and my main goal was to learn to surf, and I was trying to learn to surf on the North Shore, which in waves that were too big for me on a board that was way too advanced. And I was getting very humbled. But at the same time, I was also taking up meditation, because as you can imagine, running away when you're 16 to a foreign place with very little money was not paradise. And so I had all these anxieties. And because my parents had planted that seed that meditation can be helpful, I decided to try it. And I realized right away that I was pretty bad at both, and they were both very hard. But I remember reading, actually, I think it was a Thich Nhat Hanh book, saying, your emotions pass by like waves. And I said, my emotions are just hitting me on top of the head. They're not passing by like waves. And but at one point I learned to duck dive. I learned to a big wave. The waves had been just walloping me. And at one point a big wave came and I pushed my board under perfectly. And there was this realization that, like, that's how it should feel when your emotion, if you really learn the way your emotions move, maybe there's a way to not let them wallop you.
Yeah.
So that kind of metaphor happened organically for me when I was a teenager. And so it's fun to get to play with it now in this visual form with Matt Allen's art. That's one of my favorite pictures in the book, when Mop is duck diving, the triple wave of fear, sadness, and anger. And that's the duck dive.
I have 3 grandsons, and the oldest one's 14. He stopped by, and I showed him the book, and he said, Ryan and Jake are too young for this book. They're not going to understand the metaphor of surfing and mindfulness and all this. And I had a little bit of the same question of, because the age is 5 to 8, but are kids that old actually able to make that connection, and are they doing it in a different way than we do as adults? Or what have you seen in your kids, or just in trying the book out on children, that they must actually be able to understand the message in a way that could actually help them in school? Or what have you seen of this concept in action with kids that age?
I mean, I think we underestimate kids' abilities for social emotional learning. I mean, we've been really blessed to be part of this preschool Pacific Primary that's really wonderful, and their whole curriculum, and this is 2.5 to 5-year-olds, is working with emotions and conflict, because kids are in conflicts all the time at that age. pushing, biting, not sharing,
Yeah.
whatever. And instead of trying to like basically drop the hammer and say we're gonna have a consequence for all these actions and we're gonna keep a really peaceful classroom, every conflict is an is the curriculum. So they get the kids together, they have them each say their piece, they teach them about their breathing. It's true they're not sitting and meditating for 10 minutes or anything, but just all you need is like one breath or a beat to make that space where you have a choice, know, or so anyway, I think that traditionally education has been focused on, we just teach kids sort of skills and then we teach them how to behave.
Right.
But their emotions are at the forefront in those developmental years. And so they may not understand every aspect and every metaphor in the book, but I think if they get the point that when I'm angry, I don't have to act on it and I can take a breath and just have, like, I think kids really get that because they're in that experience so often. There are some mindfulness books like where they're talking about being present, and they're like for preschoolers. I think those generally are over kids' heads because kids are already really present. They're like in the moment, they're playing. They're like, unless you tell them like there might be ice cream later, then they're like, when's the ice cream? Take them out of the present moment. But generally, they're able to really drop in, and but then they'll be super present with their emotions. So they'll be like, now I'm having a tantrum, and then as soon as it's over, it's done. And so I think my thought with this book is like what I see with my kids is that they're run by their emotions and they feel like they don't have any choice. So one example of this metaphor working for our family is like we colored in the coloring book version of that mop, duck, diving, fear, sadness, and anger, and we put it on the wall. Like I often do their art, just taped it on the wall because they'd worked hard on it. And I wasn't planning on this, but when we had like a heated moment in the house, I started pointing to the wall and saying, "You're in a wave right now." And a couple times it really worked. And one time I love the 8-year-old who's very cerebral. He was super angry at his brother. And I said, "Caiaphas, take a breath. You're just in a wave right now. It's going to pass." And he went, "It's not going to pass. I'm going to feel like this forever. I'm so mad." And then as he said it, I said, "You're going to feel that way forever." And he cracked a smile and he realized, well, that's probably not true.
Right.
And then in that moment, it sort of did release, and he was able to talk about it. And that's really like the point you're trying to get to as a grown-up or a kid is like to take a little distance from your emotion and then being able to say what it is, like verbalize it. And that's when it usually starts to unwind a little bit.
Yeah, and I can see how you've got something so tangible for a 4-year-old. Take a breath. I mean, he knows how to do that. And if that just gives that moment when all of a sudden he can be observing himself, I bet that's pretty accessible. Well, the other thing I was listening to when we talked last time, and I think Kai had just been born, and I think you said that he appeared pretty fearless, that he liked to jump off the couch before he could even walk. And I wonder, has that level of daredevil character followed him all these 8 years?
No, it's so interesting to hear that I was saying that, because now I remember that is true. But no, he has emerged as the voice of caution among his brothers. And it's interesting to see. I remember when he was the first, so I was really excited to get him out in the waves. So I remember teaching him how to surf in the cold ocean beach when he was 2. I'd suit him up and just throw him out there, and he was fine with it. He was fearless. And then 3 and 4 hit, and he was like, I don't want to go out there. And it was so interesting because that's when like a little of their prefrontal cortex is developing, and
Sure.
that logic was kicking in. And he has very much so many of his mother's
Uh,
traits, and she is extremely bright, really early reader,
hmm.
and also very cautious, and often in a rational way. But yeah, it's like as his reading and logic kicked in, he was like, "No, I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna throw myself off that anymore. I'm not gonna do
Right.
exactly anything you say." And now the 4-year-old right now is the fearless one. So
I
we'll
see.
see if he develops a little more caution or if it's more innate.
I'm sure the pandemic affected plans for the book. Was there ever going to be a book tour that just got put online, or what's been the effect on the pandemic on plans for the book?
Yeah, this was a big shift. I was visiting so many different schools this summer and bookstores all around the state and beyond. And yeah, all that's on hold. I'm doing a handful, maybe even a dozen of like Zoom events with bookstores. Um, and there's a couple local bookstores that are now starting to do some outdoor stuff, socially distanced, that I may do around the Bay Area. But yep, it'll be an experiment.
Yeah.
This new Zoom world, but it certainly, I mean, saves gas. It's better for the earth. I'm willing to. Well, I have no choice but to try it out. So I think
Well, you may have an early mover advantage to the extent that something like this lasts even when the pandemic vaccine shows up. You're going to have been one of the first people to venture out with a book and try things to see what works.
Yeah, I mean, I have some friends whose books have come out during this, and it's been okay. You know, I think people are reading, and they're hungry for books and new content at home, and I hope to follow up with, I mean, to tag on that question before of like, are kids gonna get this? I think it plants a seed, and then I think you have to follow up with some practices and some like, hey, try this out, some explanations, things that and so that's why I'm coming out with the videos too in between the first two books. So hopefully there's something there for parents to try as well if they want to take the next step or simplify.
Yeah. Well, let's finish up. I'd like to revisit the Fear Project. That's the book we talked about first, and that book had a big impact on me. I remember just being blown away by some of the ideas you presented, talking to neurosurgeons, and then your own story. I remember. I think a part of that was fear of commitment, and then you were getting married and having a kid, and then I see on Facebook, oh my God, he's got 3 kids now. I wonder what happened to that fear of commitment. I wonder what he's afraid of now, you know. But it is an interesting interval of time, and I wonder if when you look back to that book, what you've learned about fear, what do you know about fear that you didn't know then, or do you have fears that really did kind of control your life now that have just slipped away, and now there are new fears, or how would you? What would your fear inventory look like compared with 7 years ago?
I think I mean, I still have anxieties for sure, but they tend to be about lack of time, because what I had before having kids was just tons of time, and I developed this sort of perfect bohemian writer's life where I could zip off to Bali for 3 months a year and live in a hammock and write my, short stories or novels, and then come back and do my journalism job. And if it got stressful, I could go, live in my van and drive around the coast and surf and strum my guitar. And that I was very happy with that life, but I was so in some ways addicted to that freedom of just being able to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. Not that I didn't also work hard on my journalism, but it was still sort of a like, I can take this assignment if I want it kind of life. And then I gave that up completely with having kids, and there was a real panic when, even though I was head over heels in love with Kai, about who am I now? Like where are all these? How am I going to fit in all these skills I've been developing and ways of coping? And so I think there was almost like a grieving of like I died, that old me had died, and but it was mixed with all this excitement about being a dad, and it took about, like, even now I'm still sort of adjusting to be honest, but I think on the positive side, like, there's been this beautiful sort of surrender to the chaos to some extent, where I can't manage, the house will never be clean enough. I'll never have enough time. I'll never have the perfect amount of time to exercise and write, and without having to also really be compassionate and help my family. And so that has, I think, helped me just in a mature way to just surrender to the fact that things are always a little bit imperfect, and there's a greater peace. I look at it as like, what you have to surrender to is that your true nature, your true self is the ocean, and all these passing frustrations and storms of the day can feel intense, but if you're the ocean, they're just chatter.
Yeah.
And in a sort of spiritual way, it's like, that's your only choice, but to go to that ultimate place of like, what's the real me? The real me can handle this. The real, and I touch on that at the end of the Fear Project, but I think in parenting 3 little boys and trying to handle all the day in and day out, that's your only choice for peace, is to go to that sort of ultimate level.
It's not a theory.
You're not going to micromanage it. You're not going to be like, hey, I'm going to go talk to my therapist for an hour and then go strum my guitar for an hour. You're not going to get there. So you have to, you have to just say, all right, I can get bigger than this. And that's been a good thing. But yeah, I mean, of course, I'm still just a regular human with anxiousness, but I think I am getting better at just sort of surrendering to the flow of life and the unpredictability of it. I think fatherhood has been good for that. Like with this book, I mean, there's a million things I should be doing that I just won't be able to do.
Right. Yeah.
I won't be able to do them. We're in a pandemic. The kids are out of school. There's no camps.
Yeah.
We just have to be with them and play, and they have to sort of work into our work lives. So there's a bunch of stuff I can't do, and I just have to surrender and say, well, I'm still just going to try to enjoy this because that's my only choice,
Yeah. Wow. That's a good wave.
Trying, Len, trying.
I have been speaking with Jaimal Yogis, author of a new children's book, Mop Rides the Waves of Life, available for pre-order from Plum Blossom Books. It's going to be released on June 30th. Thanks very much, Jaimal.
Thank you, Len. Really nice to chat with you again.
I'm going to turn to the news now. Actually, for those of you who follow the show, I have thought to make an experiment here to start the show with the interview. And that's because a lot of times, particularly lately, people that I talk with aren't all inside the Kindle sphere as much as those of us who have been doing this for 12 years are. And they're just conversations that have interest, I hope, to you. And when I send a link to the podcast, I thought it'd be kind of convenient for a guest to be able to just start playing it, and there they are, they're on the show. And then if they have any interest in what follows, the Amazon News and tech tips and things like that, then they can certainly follow it. And then the same thing if someone like Jaimal puts a link to this episode on his site and someone goes to it, they don't have to wait 5 or 10 minutes to get to the interview. It's just right up there as the first thing. So if you have thoughts on this, this is kind of bold to be changing the order in which we do things here on the Kindle Chronicles, but I like the idea of it, and we'll see how it works. So with that, we are turning now to the news, and there's a big story that just broke today that fascinates me. Amazon today, at its Day One blog, announced that it has signed an agreement to acquire a company named Zoox. That's Zoox, and it's a California-based company working to create autonomous ride-sharing vehicles. The quote from the press release or the blog says, Zoox is working to imagine, invent, and design a world-class autonomous ride-hailing experience. That's a quote from Jeff Wilke, Amazon's CEO of Worldwide Consumer. He continues, like Amazon, Zoox is passionate about innovation and about its customers, and we're excited to help the talented Zoox team to bring their vision to reality in the years ahead. A story in the Financial Times today reported that Amazon will pay over $1.2 billion for Zoox. The company was founded 6 years ago, and in July of 2018, well before the pandemic, it was valued at $3.2 billion. So Amazon's buying it at quite a discount, and it's because of the pandemic. Zoox had planned to launch a pilot program this year, but the pandemic just knocked those plans totally out of the water. What it's building is called a purpose-built vehicle. It doesn't have a steering wheel. It can travel in any direction. And when I looked for YouTube of it, it's a wild-looking vehicle. It looks like there's a vehicle in Westworld in the current season where people just call the vehicle to show up, and it's got 4 seats, 2 facing 2. I think that's the way it is in Westworld. Well, that's what the Zoox vehicle looks like. There's no driver's seat or wheel. It's just 4 people in this vehicle that is driving itself, and it's out there. I mean, this is science fiction in real time, and this is another long-term bet being made by Bezos. One account I saw somewhere, perhaps in Wired, if he's paying $1 billion to acquire the company, he'll be spending many billions to just bring this thing to reality, because it's very much in kind of prototype being tested. But very promising, very bold, and quite exciting. The announcement from Amazon said that they are going to run Zoox as a standalone business. It'll be led by the CEO, Aicha Evans, and Jesse Levinson, who is co-founder and CTO. I think this is, again, the Wired article. This could easily be something which is, as it looks, just a bold move to create an autonomous ride-sharing vehicle. But given that Amazon delivers packages and has experimented with all kinds of deliveries, from drones to cute little things that are driving around Snohomish County outside of Seattle, and their own planes, the possibility that this is something, the technology of Zoox might find itself into the delivery system of Amazon. One analyst said that this could save $20 billion a year for Amazon if it actually gets built in that way. Other possibilities, this could be a Prime benefit. If you're a Prime member, you get 2-day shipping, you get videos, and you can just tell your A device to call me a Zoox, and here comes the autonomous vehicle riding up to wherever you are to take a ride. It's pretty amazing. The Wired story opens with a quote from Uber's CEO saying that Uber wants to be the Amazon for transportation. And then after a smart discussion of this story, the Wired writer concluded, while Amazon's statements on Friday emphasized self-driving, observers say they wouldn't be surprised if the autonomous technology acquired as part of the Zoox deal shows up in trucks, delivery vans, or warehouse equipment. After all, Amazon seems to want to be the Amazon for everything. That's a well-written piece. So the autonomous taxi race just got much more interesting. I remember a session at South by Southwest, I think it might have been last year, on autonomous vehicles, showing how long this has been the Holy Grail, or a Holy Grail in technology, and how much progress has been made. But this speaker, who was, I think, like a consultant, said that the hardest stuff is to get an autonomous vehicle to move safely through city streets. And that's because a pedestrian, you have to basically be predicting, is that a pedestrian? Which way are they walking? What are they going to do? And on one of the videos that I found for Zoox, it shows the prototype vehicle on a very busy street, I think in San Francisco, and it's dealing with pedestrians, it's stopping at crosswalks, it's swerving around a parked car, and so it's clearly right in this hunt for a safe way to navigate a city. What I remember from the South by Southwest speaker was, this is hard and it may take 20 years to get it right, or 10 years, or who knows. So again, this is a project for somebody who likes to do things in the long term, which is exactly what Jeff Bezos is all about. Second story, news story. This is kind of a first. I think it's my first anonymous source that sent me a story, and what it is a letter from the Kindle team at Amazon dated May 29th, and it's addressed to people who were developing basically apps for the Kindle. This is for the e-ink Kindles. And I remember some of these. They were very clever. I think there was a word game, and you could do things other than read books on your Kindle because developers could develop apps for the Kindle. And I haven't heard much about it lately, and it's I think the bright tablets from the Fire and the iPad and everything else are certainly a little bit more promising place to be creating games. So in any event, I'm looking at this letter. It says hello, and then it's redacted because my anonymous sources was not showing who they were. And the Kindle team writes, "We constantly evaluate the services we offer and want to let you know that the Kindle Development Kit Limited Beta Program," was probably introduced 10 years ago, is shutting down sales completely as of June 30th, 2020. Your active Kindle content will no longer be available for sale after this date from the Kindle store. Customers who purchased Kindle active content before this date will continue to have access on supported devices. We will issue a payment to you for any outstanding amount if any of your apps were purchased up to June 30th, 2020. So rest in peace, Kindle apps. That was an experiment which one of those things that Amazon tried and now is bringing to a close. And thank you to my anonymous tipster. And if you have an anonymous tip that you would like to pass along, you can send it to me at podchronicles@gmail.com, and I will protect my sources to the nth degree. I have an item in content. I received word this week that Amazon Best Books of the Year has been announced. That was on Wednesday, June 24th. This is one of those lists that's prepared by the Amazon Books editorial team. And in the press release, it is describing that the top pick is a debut novel, The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. And this covers books that were selected by the team for the best of the month and best in different categories between January and June of 2020. Sarah Gelman, editorial director for Amazon Books, wrote, "For the Amazon Books editors, The Girl with the Louding Voice stood out thanks to its unforgettable characters and message of hope and determination when all feels lost. It's impossible to walk away from this book without feeling hopeful." A summary of the book makes it really sound powerful. It says, The Girl with the Louding Voice is a novel by Abi Dare, D-A-R-E, with an accent. In this rousing tale of courage and pluck, a 14-year-old Nigerian girl is sold into servitude by her father when her mother, a proponent of education, passes away. You will root for Aduni as she endeavors to escape her sorry and often harrowing lot and applaud the kind of strangers who buoy her efforts and her spirits. I'll have a link to this list in the show notes, and I've been talking with Amazon's publicist about having a member of the editorial books team on next week's show so that we can find out more about this book and the others on the list. They do a great job of just poring over all the books that come across their way, and there's nothing related to promoting books by Amazon Publishing or anything other than just having a team of book lovers decide which books really are worth considering. So I value the work they do, and this will be a valuable list to consider. Finally, I've got a comment from John Aga that I received. Len, I recently purchased a Fire HD8 Plus 10th generation for my wife's birthday. I am currently using a Fire HD 10 7th generation. One of my favorite features is immersion reading. I find the sound quality on my Fire HD 10 to be tinny when playing an audible edition. On the other hand, my wife's Fire HD8 Plus sound is warm and definitely not tinny. It is closer to the fond memory I still have of the sound quality of the old Fire HD8X. I would like to get your opinion of the sound quality difference. Well, I am going to try it because, as it happens, I have a Fire HD 10 and an HD8 Plus. So I'll cue something up, get the same audio to listen to, and play it for you before my high-quality Yeti Blue Yeti microphone. See if you can hear the difference, and I'll tell you if I can hear the difference too. Let me go get the stuff. Well, I have tried listening to a book. It's Facebook, The Inside Story by Stephen Levy. I have it on the Fire HD 10 and the Fire HD 8 Plus. I absolutely agree with John that the sound is much warmer and fuller on the smaller tablet, which it's the more recent tablet. I think the HD 10 came out sometime last year. But let me see if you can hear the difference here. This is the HD 10, which I think is tinnier.
It was like all the negativity about Facebook that had been accumulating since the election, like some ammo dump of recklessness, suddenly blew up in a fireball worthy of the climax of a Marvel flick.
I love Stephen Levy's writing. And here it is on the Fire HD 8 Plus. Let me make sure I get the volume all the way up.
Boss, with an idea of a website that would deliver services, notably dating, to their classmates, and maybe beyond. They were calling it the Harvard Connection. Later, they changed the name to the more generic Connect You. For much of...
Yeah, well, that's... you'd think that the bigger, more expensive tablet would have better sound, but in this case, the more recent tablet, the HD8, which I really love, by the way. I've talked before, the ergonomics of this new 8-inch tablet, I think, are very delightful, and I find when I'm sitting here in the chair looking out at the ocean reading during the day, that's my preferred tablet. I like it better than the iPad Pro because the iPad Pro is a little big, even though that's a wonderful screen. And the Oasis is sitting there by the bedside for reading as I'm falling asleep and if I head out to the beach. So interesting observation, John, and your ears and my ears agree that the HD8 Plus has got the better sound. Interesting. That's it for this week. As I said, I hope to have somebody from the Amazon Books team on next week. Also planning to talk to the person who is in charge of innovations in the warehouses to keep employees safe. And we talked about one of them last week. That just sounds like a really good story that I hope that I can bring to you perhaps the week after next. I've made this is a week of experiments. I've shifted my morning journal, which is the daily report or post or ruminations that I've been doing on flash briefing for Alexa, and I had been pretty much having them be close to 5 minutes because there's a limit of 5 minutes per post. But I thought, maybe 3 minutes is a better length. So the last few that I've done, I have had them be 3 minutes, and it's like a sonnet versus a villanelle. It's just a different form, and I'm finding that I treat things and talk about things differently when I have changed the goalposts on those items. So you might want to check that out. The way you do it is tell your Alexa device, Alexa, enable morning journal, and then anytime you say, Alexa, what's new, you'll hear the morning journal post that I put up. If you're listening to other news sources like BBC, it'll kind of appear in rotation with those other ones. And I love it. Each morning I get up and I sit for 10 minutes and then figure out what I'm going to talk about in the morning journal. Sometimes I'm recording them out on the beach here, so there's the sound of the waves, and now they're a little bit more, I won't say they're haiku, but they are more compressed than they have been up until now. This is Len Edgerly in Ocean Park, Maine. I really appreciate your listening to my show. Have a good day. Bye.